We haven't got time anymore for incremental change. What we need is massive disruptive change that can only be brought about through innovation.
All right, so welcome back everybody. Rich Brubaker, Shanghai-based social entrepreneur. Again, in Jakarta this week, meeting with some amazing people, including my friend Tom, who I've known for 12, 13, 14 years from Shanghai. He's been really making his way around the region. He was in China, Singapore, now he's in Jakarta looking at impact investment. Has a new firm called Moonshot Investments. Basically, he's tired of the old model of impact investment, has his own thesis, and we'll talk about that in this episode. So, Tom, thank you very much. Do me a favor, introduce yourself and the work that you're doing here in Jakarta.
So I work in impact investing. I've been working in this field since 2003, right at the beginning of the sector. I've been based in Asia for much of that time and moved to Jakarta about 1.5 years ago.
What is impact investing?
Impact investing is a little bit like venture capital, except that you're investing in entrepreneurs who not only will provide a financial return, but also return on impact.
But doing this for 10, 12 years, how has impact investment changed over that time?
So having been in this space since 2003, I've seen it go from an approach that was very much marginalized to something that now is having an influence on mainstream investors. Initially, it was very much more focused or coming from and practiced by people from the non-profit sector. And increasingly today, we see people from the for-profit, from the institutional investing world, are more and more moving into this space.
We talk a lot about how impact investment is and is not working to actually scale up these entrepreneurs, these organizations that are basically solving the core needs of society, environment, community, etc. Where has this worked in Asia that you've seen so far, and what keeps it from going to real scale?
I would contend that there are a lot of problems in impact investing to do with the structures that we use, which are borrowed from venture capital in Silicon Valley. In Silicon Valley, you have some of the world's best talent and the world's best innovations all congregate in a very small space, and you have ample capital to be able to oil the wheels of innovation. Outside of Silicon Valley, things are very different. Things take a lot longer to grow and gestate. You don't have the same quality of innovation and talent, if you will. And you have to have overcome then these barriers. What you can't do is hope to grow unicorns in the way that you can in Silicon Valley. Out here, it requires a lot longer period of time, a lot more investment, support for the entrepreneurs, and the financial successes that you're going to get just aren't going to be the same. What we need is a different toolkit to be able to support the entrepreneurs out here.
And what would that toolkit be?
So one thing that we desperately need in impact investing is the appetite to take on risk. You can't have innovation without an appetite for risk. And unfortunately out here, what's happened is because the financial returns aren't usually as interesting and the costs are much higher to invest and support entrepreneurs, what you end up doing is investing in ventures which will have safe and stable returns, but that also means that they're limited in the huge growth and disruption that they can be shown to affect the market.
Sure.
What we need is a different mindset and a different toolkit that allows investors to have that appetite for risk. We're looking for, what we're trying to do at Moonshot Ventures is to back ventures which are disruptive and will be high growth but also high impact. And that's a space that many impact investors to date have shied away from.
Traditional VCs, they have no problem taking on risk. So is risk actually the problem, or is assessing the risk in a way that they are used to stomaching it the problem?
In the traditional VC world, the risk you take is one-dimensional. Yeah. It's risk return. Okay. In the impact world, we need to throw in a third dimension, which is impact. So it becomes impact, risk, return. The problem is that impact investors are not rewarded or penalized for the impact that they achieve. There's no scrutiny, there's no accountability. So one thing that we're trying to introduce is to make, as investors, we become accountable and penalized or rewarded for the amount of impact risk that we take. i.e., how much impact are we able to achieve with the investments that we make? And similarly, we pass on that to the entrepreneurs and we hold them accountable. And we say the more impact you have, the more you will be rewarded.
Talk to me a little about the measurement and reporting aspects of impact investment or impact organizations.
The problem that we have is that reporting on impact is very costly, and both in time and resources invested to do it. The organizations that do it best typically are from the NGO world, development world, where they have the time and resources, and it's very important to themselves to be able to see what works. Okay, and then they'll change their budgets and their approaches according to what does or does not work. Since impact investing is born out of venture capital, if you will, or borrows the tools of venture capital, where there is no impact investing, and they're not rewarded or penalized for this, the emphasis then is much less on the rigor that's applied to impact measurement. There's no reason to do it as rigorously and as costly as the NGO world. And at the same time, we're promising impact LPs to our own investors, but our own investors aren't necessarily looking under the hood to see what kind of performance is being shown there. So there's a problem both from the people who invest in us and also in the way and the tools that we choose to do it.
How do we get the industry itself to disrupt itself to the point where it can disrupt and scale up innovations that are needed by the quickly urbanizing millions of Asians that are in our backyards?
What we're doing at Moonshot Ventures is, as we invest in an entrepreneur, we structure the investment such that the more impact that they achieve, the more equity they can buy back and hence own more of their business. It's something at the carrot that we offer. At the same time, we also use the stick on our side, which is we will lose some of the interest that we have, financial gain that we have, if we don't hit the impact metrics.
Okay.
So we're incentivized both ways to help the entrepreneur, and also we're incentivized to achieve those impact ourselves. And we believe that this sends a positive signal to the investors into our sector who want to achieve impact as much as they want financial return.
Okay. We're also talking about how you're looking at a new model where you're actually building your own company. So tell me a little about that. Like why have you come to that point in your business model? You can't even find enough to fund, you have to build your own.
Right. So in Silicon Valley, where venture capital was born, some of the world's best talent and the best innovations is concentrated in one small area. Venture capitalists can afford the luxury of waiting for entrepreneurs to come to them, or at least working in a small ecosystem to find the best entrepreneurs they want to back. In other parts of the world, unfortunately, that level of the quality of innovation, the quality of talent isn't there. And so we have to make do, we have to find other ways to get around that barrier. Our focus is to overcome certain development problems. And so our approach is, well, where can we find the best innovations in the world and the best talent from wherever they are, bring them together and introduce them into Indonesia where we operate, and provide the patient capital that they need with the right incentives. Incentives not just on financial return, but on the impact that they achieve.
What's the challenge then when you're bringing these individuals or organizations into Indonesia or into the region? How will they actually land their programming? Because it will be very different constraints. So you kind of face a different challenge. So how should you as a fund help to balance that problem?
We have to be very hands-on. And in fact, we like to think of ourselves as co-founders of the entrepreneurs. We put ourselves in the trenches with the entrepreneurs and say, how can we best solve this problem by building a business around it?
Right.
We'll look for the best ideas around the world, and we'll be there with the entrepreneurs trying to find the product market fit, looking to scale up the business. We take the point of view not just the investor, but then we're really co-founders working day in, day out with the entrepreneurs. That means that we can't have a very large portfolio. We have to work essentially with one venture at a time. But we believe that actually the best way to mitigate risk is not to diversify across many ventures, but to go deep on a few and provide a very deep level of support and align our incentives with the entrepreneurs, which we feel that's the best way to actually control risks.
When it comes to measuring impact, when it comes to kind of looking for the disruptive moonshot, what kind of numbers are you looking for? Like when you're looking at an organization, are you like, we need to see 1 million, 10 million, 1 billion users by 5 years? Like how do you play into that?
We give ourselves a rule of thumb, which is a lot of impact investors use the very rough metric of number of lives affected.
Right.
But if we use that as a standard metric, but it could be other things, number of people receiving education or access to healthcare or whatever it is. Whatever that core metric is to your sector, so the problem you want to address, we're using the kind of numbers of saying, can this affect 1 million lives within 5 years? Could it in any feasible way affect 1 billion lives in 10 years? It's that order of magnitude that we're looking at. Those kind of moonshots from the commercial world. Well, can we have a similar moonshot in the impact world?
What is it about Asia that is so special that you spent the last 12, 13 years working on this in Asia? What's happening here that you think really provides the foundation for your thesis?
Well, I mean, like everything, there are multiple sides to it. There's two sides to the coin.
Yeah.
One is personal reasons, and one is, I guess, economic reasons.
Yeah.
So the personal reason is that when I was a student, I studied anthropology, and had the opportunity, the good fortune of doing a lot of field work in Southeast Asia, and I fell in love with the region, and said to myself, if the opportunity came again, I would love to move back to the region. And that opportunity came in the form of impact investing. And when I set up my own impact investing, Moonshot Ventures, it was the obvious place to come back to, the place I knew best. At the same time, the economic reason to come to Indonesia are very compelling. This is meant to be the decade of Asia, particularly Southeast Asia. Whilst we've seen the engines of growth of India and China, Southeast Asia is largely overlooked. Indonesia, for instance, has predicted 5 to 6% growth of stable growth over the next decade.
Yeah.
And this is indicative of the whole region, really. This is an area that economically has enormous prospects, and yet at the same time, a lot of the problems faced by society are dire. But when we think about it as a problem, but also an economic opportunity, so if there's a lack of education, then providing that education is not just solving a societal problem; it's also answering to an economic opportunity.
Right.
So, really, it's the opportunity as much as the issues to solve that.
If we have 10 years, how fast do you need to find traction? You need to start investing in the next year, 2 years, 5 years, so that these things can take off? Like, how fast do you feel the need to really get into it and to get some money deployed?
So we feel that there's enormous urgency. We haven't got time anymore for incremental change. What we need is massive disruptive change that can only be brought about through innovation. For that innovation to take place, we need a different approach, which is what Moonshot Ventures are trying to do in fostering innovation, social innovation in this part of the world particularly. We don't have time. My honest belief is that we're the last generation that can alter the course, and so if we don't do it, who will?
When you're trying to assess entrepreneurs, you're trying to assess the organizations, what are 3 things that you are looking for when you're trying to fund them?
So the myth about early stage venture capital, that it's all about the business, the reality is because it's such an early stage of the venture, it's really about the entrepreneurs themselves. So most of the focus is really around the aptitudes, the ambitions, the vision of the entrepreneurs. Will they be able to stay the course throughout the 5 years plus that it takes to grow a disruptive venture? Yes, of course, the unit economics are very important. The market opportunity are very important. But given that we invest right at the early stage of the life cycle of business, most of the consideration is around the entrepreneur and how. And also whether we're a good fit for them. I mean, it's a two-way thing. Are we able to support them along their journey and provide value add in a way that maybe other investors can't?
If you're talking to another impact investor who's looking at Asia, what do they need to know before they try and enter here, before they're trying to deploy their money? You talk to these guys and girls, they're getting it wrong. How could they improve?
For a potential investor looking to move into this part of the world, I'd say that certainly Southeast Asia and Indonesia in particular has tremendous opportunity, but it requires also a lot of caution. There are a lot of barriers to entry, and so it's very important to understand the markets, to work with local players, both investors, but also we work with a large network of industrial and commercial players. The idea that you can just move in very quickly and invest very quickly is wrong. There are a lot of barriers, both institutional, regulatory, and so forth. It's taken us already a couple of years just to understand the environment before we started deploying. And the idea that you can get a quick hit and move out very quickly is also wrong. I think you should only really be looking at Asia if you're here for the long term. I think that it takes a long-term view to build a business out here, but also as an impact investor, this should be our priority. We should be really thinking about sustainable solutions in the way that we invest and not just in the entrepreneurs that we back. Yeah, thanks, Rich.
All right.